Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Board of Registered Nursing Board meeting. It is Thursday, June 29th, 2023. We will have board meeting first this AM, and then we'll be followed by the Board of Nursing Committee meeting. My name is Dolores Trujillo. I am an RN appointed by Governor Newsom in the role of the direct care provider, and I am currently the president of the Board of Nursing. Jovita Dominguez.
Good morning. My name is Jovita Dominguez, and I was appointed by Governor Newsom in the role of education and licensing.
Thank you, Jovita. Patricia Nguyen.
Good morning, everyone. Tricia Nguyen. I was appointed by Governor Newsom in the public member role.
Thank you, Patricia. David Lawler.
Good morning. I'm David Lawler. I was appointed by Governor Newsom as well in the public member role.
Thank you, David. Vicki Granowitz.
Hi, I'm Vicki Granowitz. I was appointed by President Pro Tempore Tony Atkins in the role of public member.
Thank you, Vicki. Our board executive officer, Loretta Melby.
Thank you. I am Loretta Melby, or Lori, and I am the board's executive officer appointed by the board.
Thank you, Lori. And our board counsel, Reza Pejuhesh.
Spot on, Dolores. Good morning, everybody. This is Reza, the BRN's legal counsel.
Thank you, Reza. We have now established a quorum for today's meeting. Item 1.0, BRN moderator, will you please take us to general instructions for the format of a teleconference call?
Good morning. This is the BRN moderator. I will be moderating the meeting. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the board reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, the question and answer feature will be turned on, and members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by inserting the phrase, "I would like to make a comment," in the question box, which is typically in the lower right of your screen. I will then call on the individual and unmute their microphone. The individual will have 2 minutes to make their comments. I will not give a warning as your time approaches. I will mute your microphone and announce that your time has exceeded the time allotted. I will then proceed to the next member of the public who has a comment. Please note that the question and answer feature is being used only as a means for the members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. When your turn comes, you will be prompted to unmute. If your question can be answered, the board will respond accordingly. When making your comment, When making your comment, speak about anything you believe is important for the members to know. Remember, board members cannot address any item not on the agenda. Items not on the agenda at that moment, or items that you would like to add to future meeting, or items that can be discussed later on the agenda will be discussed at their correct times during the meeting. I will provide a brief reminder of this approach at the start of each public comment item. Finally, when board members or BRN staff are not speaking, I would like to remind them to mute their microphones. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will mute your microphones for you. Thank you.
Item 3.0. Have we opened public comment?
Oh, sorry. We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Melinda Wheeler would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Melinda, on your screen, you should have be prompted to unmute yourself.
Yes.
I'd like to
There you
make a
go. Thank you.
So you would like me to make a comment about AB 1028 at this time?
No, actually, Melinda, this is Laura, the board executive officer. The 1028 will be discussed later on in the board meeting. There is an agenda item for legislation, and at that point that is brought up, if you want to make a comment, that would be the time to do it. This is for items. This is a forum where you can come in and bring up additional information that you may want the board to hear that is not related to an agenda item. So if there's say you wanted to talk about the education requirements for nursing in California, this is where it would be brought up. The board then can decide to add it to an additional a board meeting later on as an agenda item, and then we would discuss it at that point. But 1028 is on our agenda, and we will have to wait until that is agenda item is opened and discussed, and then we will open it up for public comment at that point.
Thank you, Laurie. I misunderstood.
Thank you. No problem.
Thank you. Kathy Hughes would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Nurse and the executive director of the Nurse Alliance of SEIU California. And an organization was brought to my attention yesterday that I just wanted to put out there. I had never heard of them before and thought that maybe the Board of Registered Nursing might want to look into it, or may already know something about it that I just don't know. The organization is called the Campaign for College Opportunity, and it talks about opening up nursing, addressing the nursing shortage through accelerated nursing pathways, clinical training sites, compensation and benefits for nursing faculty, scaling partnerships with community colleges and CSUs to help students go from an associate's to a BSN. But I'm also hearing rumors that there is a possibility, and this is just a rumor, so I just want to put that out there. It is not anything that I know, that the possibility is they're buying up clinical spots and then charging nursing students to access those clinical spots. I'm not sure. I don't know anything else about them. They do have a website that I forwarded the link to EO Melby just this morning, but it's called the Campaign for College Opportunity. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then on a personal note, I wanted to apologize to EO Melby and my fellow NEWAC committee members, as I was not able to attend our last meeting, and because of a family emergency, didn't have the bandwidth to let anyone know. So I just wanted to sincerely apologize for that. Thank you so much.
No problem, Kathy. I did receive your email that has been forwarded on, and you can always go onto our website as anybody can and watch the webcast or BRN recording of NEWAC, and so that you can be caught up with what you missed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I hope that the family emergency went as well.
It's getting there. Thanks.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. Moving on.
Board President, if we can skip to 5.0. Dr. Mary Fagan is having some technical issues and was not able to join for this agenda item. So if you can start off with Ledge and allow her to come on for this item, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Perfect.
Mary's here. Sorry.
It's on now. Great. Perfect. We can go back to 4.0. Sorry about that, guys.
Vice President Mary Fagan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Apologize for my technical difficulties. I'm Mary Fagan. I am Vice President of the Board of Nursing. I was appointed by Governor Newsom in the Nursing Services Administration role.
Thank you, Mary. As most of you know, Elizabeth Woods has termed out. Elizabeth was the chair for the Nursing Practice Committee. And I, as president of the BRN, current president, I would like to make a motion to appoint Mary Fagan to the chair of the Nurse Practice Committee.
I will second.
Thank you. Mary, do you accept this?
Yes, I'm happy to accept.
Thank you. We have a first and a second. We can take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Mary Fagan.
Public comment. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Totally forgot public comment.
No problem.
Moderator, will you please open it up for public comment.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in the request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right, we have a first and a second on the floor. We'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Patricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
And Vicki Granowitz.
Vicki Granowitz, yes.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Item 5.0. This is the report of the Legislative Committee. Let's see, Marissa. Has Marissa been elevated?
Yes, she has. She is on.
Okay.
Good morning.
Hi.
All righty. Oop, and there go my notes. So before I jump in, I just wanted to mention on the agenda, you will see 5 bills listed, but we will only be discussing 3 today. For AB 633 and SB 372, those had been significantly amended since we last discussed them to incorporate the board's requests. And then for AB 1028, I wanted to provide a correction to a previous bill analysis. For both AB 1695 and SB 677, the board had taken a support if amended position, but neither bill has actually been formally amended since we last discussed it to incorporate the request. So there isn't anything to discuss quite yet. We added it to the agenda just in case. You kind of never know the timeline, so we put it there. Better safe than sorry, but at this time, there's nothing to bring forward. So just wanted to put that caveat before I jump into the first bill. So
May I ask a question, Marissa?
Of course.
Well, so it has not been amended, but are there conversations where you think it might be amended?
So we've had Laura and I have conversations on both bills. SB 667, it doesn't quite look like they're going to take our suggestions. AB 1695, the sponsors have agreed to take our suggested amendments, and actually in the committee analysis, it indicated that the committee staff and the sponsors agreed to it, but the language isn't formally in print yet. So without it formally in print, there's nothing quite to bring forward. So that one is promising though. We anticipate it'll be amended any day now.
Thank you very much.
Of course. So for Assembly Bill 633, this is from Assembly Member Patterson. This bill would require the board to establish a retired license category for registered nurses who meet specified qualifications. So as you may remember, prior to the bill's introduction, board staff had actually also developed proposed regulatory text to establish a new retired license status. However, our proposed regulatory text and the bill language for the previous version contained a handful of differences, such as who would be even eligible to apply for the retired license, with our regulatory text kind of having broader criteria than the bill language at that time. So when the bill was discussed at the March meeting, the board took a support if amended position with the request that the bill language be amended to align with the regulatory text in order to kind of avoid having conflicting statutory guidance and regulatory guidance. So we've been working with the author's office, who's been extremely great to work with, and they agreed. And the bill was actually amended on June 14th to incorporate the board's requested provisions. So we're bringing the bill back before you all today. And then I will provide a quick overview right now of what the bill language for AB 633 currently states. So the bill would require the board to issue a retired license to a licensed RN who meets both of the following qualifications: holds an unrestricted license on the date of application, and if not already on the record, furnishes to the DOJ fingerprints for the purposes of conducting a criminal history record check and for the purpose of undergoing a state and federal level criminal offender record information search conducted through the DOJ. The bill would allow the board, through the regulatory process, to establish a fee for a retired license that is no less than 1/2 of the regular renewal fee. The bill would allow an applicant to apply for a retired license upon their license renewal or upon submission of an application as required by the board. The bill would exempt a retired licensee from the continuing education requirements, and it would require them to utilize their professional title, but only with the unabbreviated word retired, either directly preceding or directly following the professional title. The bill would prohibit a retired licensee from engaging in any activity that requires an active RN license. However, the bill would authorize a retired licensee to provide nursing services to the public free of charge in any public health program created by the federal, state, or local law, or administered by a federal, state, county, or local government entity, so long as the licensed RN is provided adequate medical and nursing supervision. The bill authorizes the board to investigate potential violations or take action against a retired licensee if there is a violation of the Nursing Practice Act. And then lastly, the bill states that the board can reinstate a retired license back to an active status license, but only one time. And in that instance, the retired licensee would fulfill the requirements for renewal of a license, which would include furnishing fingerprints, paying renewal fees, and providing evidence of either of the following. If they had been retired 8 years or less, then they would have to provide evidence of 30 hours of continuing education that were taken within the previous 2-year period. But if they had been retired for more than 8 years, they would either have to provide a current, valid, active, and clear license in another state, U.S. territory, or Canada, or proof of passing the current examination for licensure, so retaking and passing the NCLEX. So that is what is in the bill currently. Happy to answer any questions about the language.
And just for clarification, that 8-year requirement is identical to all of our license types. It's not specific to the retired license. So if you retire a license or any license that you no longer use in California, you go out of state, you're licensed in a different state, as long as you're continually licensed during that 8-year period, you're able to come back into California through just a regular application process. If you retire our license, do not work as an RN anywhere for 8 years, licensed as an RN, anywhere for the next 8 years, then when you do come back to be an RN, you would have to pass the NCLEX to make sure that you have at least the minimum competency to start practicing as an RN again.
Thank you, Lori. That was exactly what I was going to ask about.
Thanks, Lori.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. What we'll do is we'll go through each of these bills and then we'll open up for public comment.
Okay.
Thanks, Marissa. And my understanding is we took a support.
It was a support if amend with a request that the language be incorporate and align with the regulatory text we had, and they had agreed, and that's what this current language reflects.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the next one was Assembly Bill 1028 by Assemblymember McKinner, and this bill was previously discussed by the board at the April board meeting. And I'm bringing it back to highlight that in my previous bill analysis, the list of organizations that were in support and opposition to the bill was incorrect. For the March board meeting, when the bill was first discussed, it hadn't been heard in the policy committee yet. So the only written record we could pull from was the bill's fact sheet. And then for the April board meeting, in the rush to get things posted, I personally forgot to go back and check the legislative committee analysis to ensure that the organizations were up to date. Completely an oversight on my part, and I'm very much apologize. It was not my intent to provide inaccurate information. So I wanted to make sure to bring that publicly to everyone's attention, and that the bill analysis for this meeting contains that updated list for organizations who registered both in support of and opposition to that February 15th version, as was published in the Assembly Public Safety Committee analysis on March 27th. And so we added the bill to the agenda for this meeting so I could correct the error and also allow the organization who had pointed it out a chance to provide any additional information or materials to the members. So all the information that the members had received along with the meetings from the April board meeting have been posted publicly. So those are able for everyone to access in case there's any interest from those listening. Time-wise, again, timing's hard. So ironically, the bill was actually just amended. It hadn't been amended since it was introduced, and it was just amended again on Tuesday and then again yesterday. So I did want to note that the bill analysis that is currently posted will not reflect the most recent amendments because it had been posted a week ago. We've done a kind of quick review, and the amendments somewhat address some of the concerns. Lori and I are still in dialogue with the author and sponsors on them, but for the most part, they don't change the bill's intent or impact. They kind of provide more clarification around the bill's existing provisions, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
So my understanding is we did a support of this.
Support if amended.
If amended.
Yeah. The two main areas for amendment were around addressing the liability of the healthcare practitioner in the case of not reporting, but then also inserting some type of documentation tracking mechanism. And so Lori and I had been in kind of ongoing discussions with the authors and sponsors around what that would look like in a way that it's still being tracked, we're still getting data, and we can still kind of see the impact. And we hadn't quite gotten to final language, but still in negotiations.
So does anyone have any questions about this bill, or does anyone feel that we need to change the stand that we took as a committee on this bill?
We did have the public comment at the very beginning that we redirected so that we may choose to open up the public comment on this specific item, probably before going, like through the normal process where we cover everything. There seems to be quite a interest in 1028 over the last couple of weeks. I received emails, Marissa received emails, and they kind of went out to everybody, and then we did add them to the board meeting materials. And then I received an email as soon as yesterday on that, and then added that to the board meeting materials as well. So board members may not have had a chance to review all that because that did just get added yesterday. So there is the person that was public comment at the beginning that we redirected right now. So if you guys want to open that up to public comment before having discussion, that's a possibility also.
Before we do, Tricia?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam President. This is a bill that I have really had a lot of anxiety about. I've really struggled with it both last year and this year. And this new information that has come in, the opposition speaks directly to my fears about this bill. So I would definitely like to hear, from the opposition, before we reiterate our, position on the bill. Thank you.
Thanks, Tricia.
Yeah, Tricia, I feel exactly the same way. I mean, all we heard at the last meeting was comment in favor. So it'd be really good to hear from the public to oppose this.
Vicki?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I was going to say the same thing.
Okay. Well, why don't we hear public comment on this specific bill now? And we can open it up for discussion after that.
Real quick, this is Reza. For clarity, are we going to go back to public comment on was it 633 after? We're going to do a separate public comment for the other bills that are going to be discussed.
I was going to do public comment for the rest of the bills altogether as one, but this one had someone that wanted to do.
That's fine. I just wanted to be clear in case anyone was reserving comments for the other bills. So we're
Okay,
speaking only about 1028 at this time, and we'll be returning to public comment on the other bills separately, right?
yes. So BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment directly for this bill, 1028, AB 1028?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." And Melinda Wheeler, 1 second, please. I'd like to make a comment.
Good morning again, dear BRN. I've been a registered nurse and a nurse practitioner for 42 years. I'm the current president of the California Sexual Assault Forensic Examiner Association, CalSAFE, and still an active nurse examiner and still taking call. CalSAFE represents the 48 forensic medical teams in California, and these teams are comprised primarily of RNs and nurse practitioners who perform the majority of the work caring for sexual assault victims and domestic violence victims in California. We are the forensic nursing experts in caring for victims of violence, and we oppose AB 1028 as written. California healthcare professionals have worked many years, as many of you know, to protect victims of violence by implementing mandated reporting. And now this bill attempts to reverse years of progress. There are many unintended consequences to this bill as it is written. Fatality of domestic violence is on the rise, especially in pregnant women. We've had numerous conversations and discussions with Futures Without Violence, the main sponsor and author of the bill, to amend the language and minimize the unintended consequences. Despite our best efforts, we have not come to any agreement. We do agree the law needs to be amended, and we feel that there is common ground with Futures Without Violence. We are proposing a more nuanced and measured approach. For example, we'd like to see in-person advocacy a must, and then an opt-out option to report to police. So there's many things that we can do to soften the language. We want to protect the most seriously injured patients who present to the ED and urgent care settings. Please support your forensic nursing experts to better guide the amendments to PC 11160. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on, one more. Somebody snuck in. Jacqueline Winters would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Good morning. My name is Jacqueline.
Hello? You're real low. You'll have to speak up. Oh, we lost her. Hold on.
Okay, let's try that again. Sorry. Can you hear me?
You still have to speak up.
Still have to speak up, yeah.
Okay, let's try it by.
Perfect, right there.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Winters Hall. I am a registered nurse, a public health nurse, and a sexual assault forensic nurse examiner in rural Northern California. I respectfully and strongly oppose 1028 as it is currently written. In our community up here in rural Northern California, we are on the front line of crime. We take immense pride in the trauma-informed medical and forensic care that we provide to the patients that we serve. Are you aware that in Butte and Glenn counties and many other rural California counties, advocacy agencies, including Rape Crisis, have not provided in-person services to the hospital since prior to March of 2020? In my role, I provide forensic medical exams for pediatric, adult, adolescent patients, and geriatric patients every day. Our emergency department, trauma team, and sexual assault response team provide care to these patients who are victims of criminal violence. We always make sure that the patient has contact information for community resources for domestic violence and sexual assault, but there's no guarantee that the patient will connect with those desperately needed resources, especially since advocacy doesn't come to the hospital. Also, please note some communities do not have advocacy available to them at all. And there are currently no resources for human trafficking survivors in Butte and Glenn counties, except the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is a 1-800 number. When we call it, it tells the victim to call law enforcement or go to the hospital. AB 1028 with its current language is dangerous to our most vulnerable patients and the children living in the homes witnessing violence. In its current form, AB 1028 only mandates the reporting of injuries as a result of a firearm. This means that patients who have been raped, strangled, beaten, kicked, burned, stabbed, or tortured with any other weapon besides a gun would not receive equity and protection or a community response. According to the Training Institute on Strangulation Prevention, a woman who has suffered a non-fatal strangulation incident with her intimate partner is 750 times more likely to be killed by him with a gun. What this bill is asking us as registered nurses to do is only report to law enforcement when our patients are brought to the hospital with gunshot wounds, even if they have been strangled in the past. Repealing healthcare provider mandatory reporting laws for adults experiencing abuse or assaultive conduct as currently covered and protected eliminates equal protections for victims of abuse and violence in California. I have firsthand experience with the challenges of caring for this vulnerable population, and I'm dedicated to improving the medical and forensic medical care provided. Compliance and liability are not our only concerns. Far from it, our priority is ensuring that the medical needs are addressed in a trauma-informed manner and patients are supported, believed, and safe. Improvements can be made to the mandatory reporting laws, but not by eliminating them. I respectfully request that the Board of Registered Nursing joins me in opposing AB 1028. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Sorry, Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments, but there is a written question in
I
there.
see that, yeah. We had public comment for items not on the agenda at the beginning. And it's not part of the agenda. Reza?
I didn't see what the written comment was.
Comment.
Are they wanting?
It just says they have a question concern that is off of the agenda. May I address it verbally?
I think I mean, maybe if we finish this agenda item so as not to kind of lose our place, and then give the person a chance to, if you don't think it'll disrupt the flow of the meeting, why not?
Yeah.
They're saying correct, but I have a question to address licensure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Sure. But to that person, I will just say it's possible that your question might not be able to be answered here during the board meeting in this type of a forum, but I suppose we can see.
All right. Thank
But
you.
yeah, I think it's good to just continue with this agenda item and not lose track.
Yes. All right.
Sorry, would you like to close this window?
Yes, I would. Thank you. All right. To the board members. you've heard opposition and public comment. We can, if we vote, change our position if that's what you would like done.
Madam President, Tricia
Yes.
Wynn, I have a question
Sure, Tricia.
or a comment, I guess. I'm persuaded by both the public comments that we heard today in opposition to this bill and the opposition letters that were sent in to the board members that is on the site, that we have the wrong position on this bill. More information has come forward. My fears are more aligned with the concerns of the opposition than the proponents of this bill. So I would be in favor of changing our position from support to oppose on this bill.
Vicki?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I continue to oppose the bill like I did the last time. I think that we as a culture often flip-flop from one extreme to another extreme. And I'm afraid that if we pass this bill, that in another decade we'll be amending it. So I would think that a better idea is to amend it with some of the suggestions in the opposition letters, where you identify some things that you can do. But as somebody who was a mandated reporter when I was working in the area of child abuse and sexual assault, those were children that would very easily be not reported under this bill. It's my fear. And I just can't sleep at night thinking about children and women and certainly men, some men, where we could be just setting parameters that more closely define what we're looking for than just scrapping it all together. I think it's a big mistake, and I think we'll be trying to fix it yet again. So I will continue to oppose this bill.
Dolores?
Yeah, David. Thank you, Vicki. Yes, David.
I just wanted to add, if my memory serves correctly, this has been with us a long time. I originally opposed it vigorously and aggressively. And I believe with the support position we have, not being either a nurse or in law enforcement, I feel like I was respectfully listening to those voices who are supporting it. But now that I look at this list, it reminds me of how torn, I'm not the only one, torn in their feelings about this, because I do oppose it. I'm concerned about those who are supporting it, who are groups that I absolutely ally myself with. But I'm back to listening to CalSafe's ideas about changing the language and about what's happening in our rural communities. And once again, I'm leaning towards opposing this again and changing our position.
I do want to take this opportunity to provide just a little clarification to what Vicki had mentioned with the reporting of child abuse, et cetera. This law does not affect reporting of child abuse or elder abuse. That continues to be mandated reporter. This law did not update, this bill did not update or change that. And then just to be in complete transparency, as Marissa and I were meeting with the bill authors and support and stuff, we did have a lot of conversation around the same items that CalSafe has suggested for improvements. That did stem from Vicki's recommendation that came from the last board meeting, where we took a position that talked about documentation. As I've shared previously, I am also a sexual assault nurse examiner prior to coming into my position at the board. And I was aware of the non-incident reporting form and why that is carried out and offered to victims so that they have a choice. And that was one of the options that was presented to the author and to the bill sponsor as something that they could consider. So that is in discussion, just so you guys know, but I absolutely do understand the position of oppose. Is there anything in this bill that you guys would like to see changed if there was oppose unless amended, or is it a straight oppose? Just so that I have further direction as we continue to work with them through this legislative process.
I would like to see the opt-in or opt-out added in.
Opt-out.
Yeah, that does occur when you do non-incident reporting. So very with what they were sharing as part of the sexual assault nurse examiner and that process that goes with that is when that person reports either to the emergency department or directly to an organization that does these examinations outside of the ER. They are given the option to do an actual formal police report or a non-incident report. And that really puts the power back into the victim's hands at that point, that they can say, yes, please report to police, or no, please take all of my information, get all the details, get the evidence, take pictures, gather biologic information, whatever needs to be done, document that in your medical record, and then they save that. So part of that non-incident reporting is all of that evidence is gathered and saved. With the current structure, I believe with the sexual assault is saved for 18 months, and the victim has 18 months to decide whether they want to change their mind to then initiate a police report at that point, and the evidence has been maintained. And so that's a very wonderful aspect of that reporting structure that is done. But it does put that decision-making directly back into the hands of the victim to say, do I want this reported or do I not want this reported, but I want the evidence there and the ability to change my mind in the future. The other thing that is typically done with the sexual assault is that they do hook them up and connect them with the advocate, which was the big push for this bill. And what the bill authors had asked for is to have that advocacy with that warm handoff done. And that has been a part that has been missing in emergency rooms, et cetera, across California, because it is typically just a phone call to police. Sometimes it activates social services if that's available in the hospital, but rarely do they attach them with an advocate service right then and there. So there is some, as you know, CalSafe even agreed, there are some good things with this bill. But there are definite room for growth and working to get it to a place where it can be implemented safely and not have all the unintended consequences that has been brought up to us today.
I would like to see added in Colorado, they include mandatory reporting for domestic assaults with serious bodily injury. Or Tennessee requires it for life-threatening injuries, including strangulation. So we could certainly take language from what's working in other states that might be helpful. I'm still ambivalent about the idea of giving survivors a choice, because some of them are just so afraid of their perpetrator that unless there's mandatory reporting, they won't report, and they will end up with continuing injuries. So I'm ambivalent about that, but certainly there has to be some other language that could be included.
Any other questions or comments? So Lori, if we took an oppose unless amended, and we would ask that some of these ideas or thoughts be put into that language, is that a possibility?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And Marissa can elaborate on that much better than I can. When you do an oppose, it just means nothing. No, we don't like this. Directly oppose, and there's no guidance given at that point. If there are good things in this bill that you guys still see from when you guys supported it at the last meeting that this was brought up and discussed and the position was taken, that's great information for the author to have and the sponsors to have. If there are specific items in this bill that you absolutely want to see removed or added, that's when you would have that kind of laid out right here. So if you guys were to do an oppose unless amended, then I do have the language from Vicki right now that has us looking at Colorado and Tennessee, looking at those mandated reporting requirements there. And then, you know, that's a starting point. The previous support unless with amendments was the documentation piece. And that's where we've been working with them on that with using the example of the OES 2923. And that is a sexual assault non-incident reporting form, just to show that there is consistency from county to county. You do get reporting. You don't give identifiable information. That way, that the victim does have the ability to have a tracking mechanism without having a police report essentially filed. It also allows for crime data to be submitted through the police to the state and then federal government, so that can be tracked, et cetera. So there's a lot of good things, and that was in alignment with what CalSafe had brought forward. And so those discussions are already there. So that discussion can't continue because that was part of the support with amends, support if amended, sorry. And so that documentation part, utilizing that form, having that option, those are all things that can continue to be discussed if you guys go with oppose unless amended position. And then I'll pass it off to you to add more.
Yeah, you covered it great, but I was going to say oppose unless amended is almost kind of like a more stringent version of support if amended, but the default is kind of where the difference is what happens if those amends don't occur. So with a support if amended, kind of the default typically is like, okay, we'll be a neutral. You know, we're not going to be a strong support. We're not going to be opposed. We'll be in the middle. Oppose unless amended is saying unless these amendments are made, we are going to be an oppose. So it sends a little bit of a stronger message. And like Lori had said, some of the previous things that have been brought up that we have been discussing did actually align with what had been provided from CalSafe, but we can, if whatever the members wish to do, you can switch to an oppose unless amended and expand the list of amendments. So any way you want to go with this, there's pretty much a position to reflect it.
You can also stick with the straight oppose, which is what was kind of put out before it went to public comment here also. So that is a straight oppose. We would have the reasons why the board opposes it. Those would be outlined, and we would then continue the conversations with that. And that is a bigger kind of message that says, full stop. This isn't what we want. Please look at why you're opposing this, and then maybe bring back later a different version of this bill, some sort of thing like that. So oppose is a very strong message. Absolutely makes sense. That's how you guys want to move forward. Oppose with amends, unless amended, allows for additional conversation. Hopefully that stuff changes, and then we just kind of move through the process still.
I think oppose with amended is also maybe not as strong like you're saying, Lori, but since our amendments align with the language they've already heard being recommended to them from other organizations, just makes it that much more powerful. We're saying the same thing the other organizations are, so we're aligning ourselves with those amendment requests.
Agree.
And the last thing I want to say is to answer your question. Originally, one thing I believe we strongly agreed with and supported was the warm handoff, the idea of an advocate and the advocacy agencies being involved instead of just a straight police report. That was a big influencer on me and I remember in that last discussion, that was an important component of this.
Trisha? I can't hear you, Trisha.
Sorry about that. 3 years in, we still have forgotten to unmute. I'd like to align myself with David's comments. David, I agree with you. although we heard today that we have 58 counties in California with lots of different, every county has its own processes. We heard that at least 2 counties don't really have that. And that's just because a witness told us that the 2 counties she works in don't have. I mean, how many other counties are there out there where that is not happening?
Yeah,
It makes me worry.
All right. Any other questions or comments from board members?
It's definitely, this is Jovita. It's definitely, it's really sad what happens to families or, the person that you're supposed to confide in and be safe with. And all these, and the men included, men and women are very vulnerable with this kind of violence in their home.
This is Reza. I wanted to put out, it seems like the board members generally have a pretty strong opinion on the bill either way, but as far as your options, I think one additional one, and Marissa, correct me if I'm wrong, is to simply withdraw the board's previous position if you just didn't feel like you were convinced either way, or for whatever reason just didn't want the board to be continue to be on record on it. So I don't know if that's another option, but and even one that you would consider at this point, having heard this discussion, but just want to put them all out there.
So in a motion, we can decide to state we withdraw our original position and either state the new position in the motion or
You could, or you can just withdraw the position and then it would be either a watch or a no position. One other thing, just a real quick direct back on the meeting materials, there was discussion about advocacy and access in the rural areas. And I had specifically asked about that during that presentation, and it's on the supplemental materials for the board meeting, page 6. And it says, Lord Melby asked if any provisions could be added into the bill for rural areas that don't have a good supply of advocacy programs, and asked what the thoughts on advocacies are in general. She asked about training mandates for advocates that get the referrals. And then it does have a response where it says, Kristen Colon thanked Patricia Wynn for a thought. She said that language included handoff to local services or to national advocacy services, such as the National Domestic Violence Hotline, recognizing that local programs are few and far between, especially in rural communities, which can be small and close-knit. She said they may add language to clarify the referral can be made via email if services are not immediately available. And then that's when Vicki then went on to say about she wanted language added about protecting people who don't make reports, etc. So I believe our board is fairly consistent. We did raise these concerns in the last meeting and are continuing to bring these concerns forward. So just wanted to kind of share that with you guys.
I think at this point, it appears to me that the motion should be we withdraw our previous position. And would the board be in favor of opposing in that place or watch? Yes.
I would be in favor of either oppose, and I'm leaning more strongly towards oppose, or oppose if amended.
Okay.
This is Vicki. I agree with Mary. Oppose if amended, and then provide our suggestions.
Okay.
My question is, can this bill be fixed with a few amendments? I mean, I wonder if the intent of the bill is to delete this requirement. And if that's the intent of the bill, how do you kind of amend around that if that's the intent of the bill? I don't know the answer to this, but I'm leaning more toward an oppose than trying to fix it, because I don't know enough about it really right now.
Yeah, I am too, actually.
Just clarification, with the non-incident reporting, it still is reporting, and it is part of the mandated reporting, so that wouldn't have to be removed. That would be a process change where you can do a non-incident reporting and a reporting and such. So I think you're right there, Tricia, with just needing more information on how that can be rolled out, and seeing if that is there. This could be a 2-year bill. Is that correct, Marissa? If things could not get worked out this specific session, it can go into next year. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is. And I think what I would say around, I hear you, Tricia, on the intent. And I think that's part of why a position like opposed unless amended is kind of a good option if that's the choice you want to make versus opposed, because it's saying we kind of see where you're going. We don't necessarily agree with the intent as it is now. We would agree if it kind of, shifted this way. But if it doesn't, we're staying in the no lane. Or if it's just, I think any premise or provision in here is just going down the wrong path, then a straight oppose would be more appropriate.
That's a great clarification, and I agree. Thank you, Marissa. I like the idea of giving them one more chance to figure out how to amend it. It's not urgent on the calendar where this is going, to the floor in October. I think we're okay with saying opposed to amended.
Okay.
This is Vicki, and my experience is that often legislators are more willing to listen to your comments if you're in the game, rather than just saying we're opting out, we just think it's bad, so that they're a little more receptive, because there's still an opportunity. We're not saying throw it out entirely. We're saying we see what you're trying to do, sort of.
And I just want to clarify that the bill is still moving this session, but if the sponsors, the author decided, hey, rather than risk it, it could get stopped at any point. It's going to go to the Senate Public Safety Committee, and there could be an action. It's going to go to PROPS. There could be an action on the floor. But what they could choose to do is say, hey, we're going to hold it right now, kind of have some more discussions and, keep moving it next year. Or they are within their, right to kind of just keep it moving. But because it is in that 2-year session, it doesn't eliminate it starting next year. Whereas if we started a new session, the bill would no longer be a bill anymore. I hope that kind of clarifies it.
It does for me, certainly. Marissa, one question I have is, since the bill is really kind of going in a direction fundamentally that we're not agreeing with, what would the amendment be? You don't have to report if these 5 things happen? Or, it's kind of hard to imagine if you don't report, then what, what do you build in to make this bill be something that we could support? That's what I'm grappling with right now. I agree with you, Marissa. If we say oppose unless amended, it keeps us in the conversation, but maybe this is a conversation we don't need to be involved in since we don't support the premise of the bill.
Mm-hmm. I would, Lori can speak way more in depth to the kind of tracking process and all that. I would think that the main kind of crux is that mandate. And if that opt-in, opt-out choice kind of thing is really kind of at the heart of this matter. I agree with the utilizing the support services versus the kind of law enforcement. But I think what the big main change, and anyone feel free to correct me if you're reading it differently, is really just taking out, currently the law says it has to be reported to law enforcement. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It has to. And it's kind of looking at that, saying, should there be a opt-in, opt-out kind of provision? And I think the bill language kind of goes to one side of it pretty directly. The current law language goes to one side pretty directly. Some of the amendments we've heard from stakeholders may kind of hit in the middle a little bit, but I would say that's kind of the crux of the policy change that's being addressed. And then also, if law enforcement isn't that mandated next step, what are those support services, or are those added in addition to law enforcement, as David was discussing?
Yeah, and that was actually discussed last year as well with this, and then in the discussion as well. The first time this was brought forward, and then the boards, we needed more information, so we got the author and the sponsors to come and do a presentation because we needed more information. And part of that was, it's such a big change to change all healthcare providers, because it's not just nurses. This law changes physicians, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, nurses, all the providers within healthcare to not be a mandated reporter for these specific circumstances. For any patient that is not elderly, a child, or incapacitated in some way. And so it really did, that's the crux of it. That was the biggest impact and the biggest change. Doing the warm handoff, doing those kind of support services and handing it off to like advocacy groups, etc. Those can be done without changing this bill. Those can't without passing this bill, sorry. And so you don't need to remove the mandated reporting in order to add the additional services. Those can be done on an individual basis through various healthcare organizations, or if this bill were to be amended, not remove the mandated reporting, but make it mandated that the healthcare facilities have to associate them with an advocacy group in addition to the report to law enforcement. So there's a lot of different ways that this can be amended or altered in order to kind of do that. One of the big things that I just wanted to redirect this for, be devil's advocate, not that I'm saying I'm in agreement with it or anything with that, is the original intent of this bill. They did speak really clear about people not seeking services for life-threatening injuries because of the fear of reporting to law enforcement, which was one of the reasons why they were trying to remove that barrier, so that if somebody was strangled, if somebody was gravely injured, that instead of staying at home and potentially the injuries worsening and more morbidity and mortality coming from those injuries for not seeking care, that this would open them up to be able to seek that care without the fear of law enforcement. And that was the biggest one that was brought forward to us from the bill's sponsors. So that was the reason for removing the mandated reporting. So I just wanted to make sure that it's still kind of out there for consideration to think about as you guys are working through this process. If that mandated reporting is not removed, then that barrier that they had discovered is still there. And so having them come in and seek the services, knowing that that possibility is still there, is still the barrier that they identified. So there's just a lot to take in, a lot to look at, and a lot to kind of work with this. But what we said last year in our board was, we do understand as a board that this needed to be updated and changed. We do think that there is a reason for this, and I think that's in alignment with what Cal Safe is saying as well. There is some changes that need to happen with this law, but that the bill is not quite at the ready. That there are too many unintended consequences, and that, I believe, was the main impetus for the board taking the opposed position last year also.
Lori, there was also in some of the letters we got that opposed that identified that there were some disconnect in the studies that were done, and that the studies that showed people didn't do what you said were limited to a very small sample, and that there were some issues even within that sample. So the research isn't clear on that. And so I'm not sure what reality is on that issue. There's always been research that has said that people won't report because they're afraid of what'll happen if they do report. But then some of the literature shows that there's a high percentage of people that, so the literature is a little bit all over the map. So I'm not sure how much to trust any of the literature at this point, which is a terrible thing to have to say.
That's when you eloquently say, I think we're heading there, but we need more research and more evidence to support. So you're right in line with that.
All right. So we can make a motion to withdraw our previous support if amended on the bill. And I guess what I'm hearing opposition. It does concern me that the crux of the bill, as Tricia said, really is when we go there is whether to report or not. And it sounds like most of us are in favor of reporting, which is not what this bill states. So we can either take an oppose, because I don't know that oppose, if amended, really gets to that crux of not reporting. It still doesn't address really what each of us is feeling about this bill. We could either oppose or we can watch.
I'd rather oppose than just watch. Watching takes us out of what's going on.
I would also support an opposed position, Dolores.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and make the motion. I would like to make a motion to withdraw the support if amended previous stand that the BRN board members took. And I would like to change that to oppose.
I'll second that emotion. This is Vicki.
All right. We've already opened up for public comment, so we can probably take this to a vote. So Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Patricia Nguyen.
Tricia Nguyen, yes.
David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
And Vicki Granowitz.
Vicki Granowitz, yes.
Thank you. That was very good discussion we had. Thank you. All right, so the motion carries. Marissa, we can continue on with the rest of the bills.
So there's only one more.
Yes.
And that is Senate Bill 372 by Senator Menjivar. And so this bill would require a board under the Department of Consumer Affairs to replace references to a licensee's former name or gender on their license and on any related website upon request when the licensee's name or gender has been changed, or upon the licensee's participation in the Safe at Home address confidentiality program. So this bill was last discussed at the March board meeting, and the board had taken a support if amended position with the request for ensure the bill language, with a bill amended to ensure consumers still have access to information on past enforcement or disciplinary actions taken against a licensee under a previous name. So this was a bill that was addressing individuals who had transitioned and had new gender identity. And if their previous name was removed, we wanted to make sure that any potential disciplinary action, there not always is, but that access is still there for consumers. And so given that this is a DCA-wide bill and there's 30 plus boards underneath, DCA has been was helpful in kind of bringing us all together. So DCA staff and staff from several boards, including the BRN, met with the author's office and the bill sponsors to provide technical assistance on the language. Since different boards kind of submitted different positions and they had different amendment requests, the goal of that discussion was to try and identify potential language that would address at least some of the big concerns that were shared by multiple boards, because every board had a little bit of a different take. But the main concern that seemed to have a thread amongst all the boards was ensuring that ongoing access to information on disciplinary actions. So based on those discussions that the group had with the author's office and the sponsor's office, the bill was recently significantly amended. So now I will go over what the bill currently requires. So this bill would require each board under DCA, upon request and receipt of specified documentation, to replace references to a licensee's former name and or gender on any license that has been issued when the licensee's name has been changed due to a change in gender or due to participation in the state's address confidentiality program. For a board that operates an online license verification system, such as DCA License Lookup, any references to the licensee's former name or gender would be required to be replaced with the individual's current name and or gender. The licensee can provide either of the following documents to demonstrate a legal name change: a certified court order that reflects the licensee's updated name and was issued pursuant to a proceeding for a change of name in order to conform the licensee's name to the licensee's gender identity, or a certified court order issued under the Secretary of State's Safe at Home program. The licensee can also provide any of the following documents to demonstrate a gender change: a state-issued driver's license or ID card, birth certificate, passport, social security card, or again, a court order indicating a gender change. So if the public search of the online license verification system is performed using the licensee's former name that was replaced, the bill would require the board to post an online statement directing the public could contact the board for more information about the licensee or registrant. If a licensee was previously subjected to an enforcement action that references the licensee's former name or gender, the board would be prohibited from posting those records online. The board would instead be required to post a statement directing the public to contact the board for more information about the licensee's prior enforcement action. And then the board would be expected to respond to these types of requests within 10 days in accordance with the Public Records Act request. And lastly, the bill would require a board to, upon request from the licensee, reissue a license created by the board, and it would prohibit a board from charging a higher fee for reissuing that document than it would ordinarily charge for reissuing a document with other updated information. So happy to answer any questions.
Our previous stand on this was support, correct?
It was support if amended. Yeah, the very first, the version that we had discussed at the March meeting was much briefer than this,
Yes.
and was more just kind of saying replace the name, and the concern around, okay, we understand replacing the name, but we want to make sure that if there was enforcement action, that can still be accessed by a consumer who's looking into a licensee's background.
Marissa, this is Vicki. Will there be some kind of a link to describe what a disciplinary action is so that it's clear what we're talking about?
In terms of like the different types of disciplinary action that could be?
Well, something so that people don't think it's just a minor little
Gotcha.
thing. You know, disciplinary action is a big issue. It's a big thing. And so there somewhere needs to be something so that the public knows these aren't small little issues. Disciplinary actions are major processes that we're looking at. So I don't know how you do that, but I was just thinking you could include a link back to somewhere that already exists.
But I think that's where they would contact the board if more information was needed, and the board would have to provide a response within 10 days. Is that the portion that you were talking about?
I would say that you would include that, but there would also be a link to a definition of what disciplinary action means.
Yeah. And that is actually something that I think I was mentioning to Lori yesterday on trying to figure out, because one of the tricky things about having DCA-wide bills is sometimes it's kind of a DCA-wide IT fix. And so I don't know for sure what the term disciplinary action means for other boards. It could include kind of more minor infractions than the BRN.
Oh.
But in the broader discussions, I know for us it tends to be more serious. I would think it aligns with other boards, but I can't say that for all of them with complete guarantee just because they cover such a wide range of professions. But in the discussions, when talking, we did say that, you know, we would have some level of kind of ability to craft a message or kind of work on the language on what would be posted and how they would contact us. And maybe that could be where we kind of specify what the term enforcement or disciplinary action could entail.
There could be links to every individual
Type.
discipline too.
There are.
Yeah, there are.
I was just going to say that already exists. It's on our website.
So you could link
BRN's
to that.
website, ca.gov. There's a list of disciplinary actions, terminology, et cetera. So if what you're asking for is that information, it's already there. But
Yeah,
they can
just,
easily, I'm sure, link this to that
to that. Yeah.
because it already exists. It's here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I assume most people looking up this information understand what that means. No, not public, but like, you know, an HR department who's going to hire somebody. Right?
But the public wouldn't.
True. True.
Yeah, and it could be in there as, for enforcement action. Examples of enforcement action could include, like, please see this link and whatnot. That could be something we could definitely explore. Because yeah, the law doesn't dictate what that language looks like and how it's written. Just that we do at least alert that there is enforcement. And so in a lot of these, there won't be enforcement action, and in that case, there won't be anything to indicate. But in the instance, if there is, it will say on there is enforcement. Please contact the board if you want more information, just to kind of signal that to whoever's looking up.
So since we already have a support if amended, could we add Vicky's request to that list of amendments that we're seeking? Or would we have to do another vote?
So I think the original kind of ask was more around making sure the access to the enforcement. So if you think that this language addresses that ask, then you could, if you wish, move to a support. If you don't think it addresses that ask, we could ask for different amendments. I would it could be tricky to ask to get so granular in a way that the bill's written based on the Board of Registered Nursing's processes, again, because it's a tricky thing when you're doing kind of all the boards.
DCA-wide.
Yeah, that is the only kind of caution I would say. But it could be something, because I have a bunch of notes actually that as we've been talking through implementation, what would this look like with our internal staff? What are the things we'd have to factor in? And this could be something I could add, but of course it's completely up to you what the.
I'm fine with just trusting you to add this to everything else you're looking at rather than making it specific.
Okay. So we can keep our support if amended.
Mm-hmm.
Our original stand.
Yeah.
And what would the amendments be now that you would want? Or would there be further amendments, or is it so? Okay.
So I think Marissa had explained earlier that the original support if amended position was based on the desire for amendments to address the issue of, how do we report out for individuals who have enforcement action? Because that was, again, in the very initial bare bones version of this bill that you previously considered was not part of it. So as she said, if the current new kind of more developed version of it addresses your concerns about enforcement, then I think it would be just a support position. Otherwise, you would probably want to say support if amended because our previous concerns were not addressed in this or that way, or if there are other amendments that you'd like to see. The other thing I just wanted to mention is I think this bill, there are definitely still questions and issues that need to be sorted out. Every kind of iteration of this bill that's been put out there so far has kind of gotten a little bit more progressively developed, and but even the current one still leaves a lot of questions, such as what do we, if someone makes a request for the record, then what? The records are going to identify their former name, their former gender, and how do we deal with that? That is just to say that I think ultimately when, if this bill were to pass in the current or some other form, I anticipate that DCA would give some guidance to the boards on compliance. That's presumptuous of me, but generally, for something like this, DCA would give some guidance. And as Marissa said, it's on the IT side, it's probably going to be implemented the same way across all boards. So as to some of the, there are definitely some questions in my mind, and Marissa has obviously been making a list as well. But hopefully, either if those things are not addressed in subsequent versions of this bill, they are things that you will maybe get some guidance from DCA for uniformity and all that.
So in the list that Marissa has, that list I think we talked about the last meeting, Marissa, some of the changes that we would like to see amended when we took this support if amended. Were all of those changes implemented?
So in the last meeting, the discussion was, the list I had, I was referencing more talking with staff on implementation, stuff that we wanted to make sure we kept in mind, even though if it wasn't in the bill language. And I think Vicki brought up a good point around had that clarification on what disciplinary action means. In the previous discussion, because we had been kind of going back and forth internally on how is there a way, from what I had been told, this bill's come up multiple times. And because there's a real kind of need and that has been identified by the transgender community to remove the dead name, that it's having some bad consequences. And I think it is applicable in other boards, maybe more than in our board, but it still obviously would impact our licensees. And so in discussions with all the boards, it was kind of like, we see the intent, but how do we get there to make sure enforcement? And so from the BRN's perspective, we said, and we had initially suggested, well, based on our processes, we could say, we'll do an initial review of your application or whatnot, or your background. And if there is enforcement, then it wouldn't necessarily be eligible, or we didn't quite get that far. But if there isn't enforcement, it would kind of be a moot point because there wouldn't be any information that would be left. So that was kind of the broad discussion around what would the language look like. And the general ask was, making sure that access to that enforcement data is there. So when we went into that broader kind of all the boards get together, they all had kind of similar things, well, for ours, we would do this process, ours. And I think that's why the sponsors and the author's office and DCA tried to get us all together to see, is there some type of uniform language that could attempt to address that larger concern that seems to go across all the boards around making sure that enforcement, the consumers or employers or anyone looking up is aware that if there is enforcement data and it occurred under the licensee's previous name, they are made aware of that and they have access to that without necessarily displaying the dead name with the documents that have their dead name on the website itself. Like they would have to reach out to the board. So it has been kind of an ongoing complex discussion. I'm not going to lie to you. So that's kind of the background. I hope that helps.
Right. Any other
That
questions?
certainly helps me. I mean, certainly when we're reading some of these cases, you see, maybe 3 names that a nursing license has been held under. So as long as, it feels like we're going to be protecting the public under this bill because there's a process. Is that what you think, Marissa?
In my just personal, I think it strikes as good a balance as I've seen proposed yet. I think it's a really hard kind of thing to get where while the information isn't just there like it would be with another licensee, it is accessible. We have a timeline we have to respond, and it does indicate that enforcement is there. So it's not just, contact the board and someone's like, but it's contact the board, there is enforcement. So I think it does try and strike that middle ground as best as it can. Again, we may not have as high a volume. This bill was sponsored by a group like marriage family therapists and behavioral health therapists, which I think it's more common with their licensees and their specialties and their treatments and whatnot. And so I think they tried really, really, really hard to find that middle ground. I think it's kind of everyone's personal decision whether they think it meets that kind of consumer protection or not. So I don't want to.
Thank you. I appreciate your thoughts.
Any other questions or comments? I would like to make a motion to withdraw our previous support if amended and change it to support.
I second that.
Thank you. I guess now we could open it up for public comment for both 633 and 372 before we vote. Reza?
Sorry. Yes.
Okay. So BRN moderator, can you please open up for public comment for both of those bills before we vote?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in the request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public. Type in, "I would like to make a comment."
And while we wait, this is Reza. I know we just got a motion on SB 372 to change the position to support. On AB 633, was there a motion? Did I miss that?
I think our original position was support if amended. I think we're keeping that.
Okay, so there's no motion there.
What, just to clarify, it's kind of the same instance as 372 where it was support if amended with request for them to change the language, and then they changed the language. So if we think that it addressed our ask, then it could be a support if that's
okay.
Unless there's further amendments that are wanted by the board, then we can.
I don't.
100%.
There were none listed, or nobody listed any. So that would be a separate motion, wouldn't it be, Reza? I would have to make a motion for also to change the language at 633 from support if amended to support.
Yes, and real quick, just Marissa, generally in that situation, is it typical to formally change the board's position? Okay, in that case, a separate motion, I think, for AB 633 would be appropriate.
It's typically just kind of like a good faith, we're asking for these changes, they make the changes, so we say, then now we support, which was what the position, if you amend it, we will.
So before we hear public comments regarding Bill AB 633, I would like to withdraw the board's previous position of support if amended and change that to support. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Tricia.
Sure.
So now we have 2 motions, and we'll vote separately on each one.
And we'll take public comment, I think, on either or both AB 633 and SB 372.
All right, so we can open it up for public comment.
So we are currently open for public comment, and there are no requests for public comment.
Okay.
Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's vote on the first bill. This is AB 633. We are changing it from support if amended to support. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Tricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
David Lawler.
David, yes.
And Vicki Granowitz.
Vicki Granowitz, yes.
Thank you. And on the second bill, this is AB 372. We are changing we're withdrawing our original support if amended to support the bill. So we'll take a vote on that. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Tricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
David Lawler.
David, yes.
And Vicki Granowitz.
Vicki Granowitz, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I believe this concludes the ledge portion